Let them know with Joe, we're back. We got Jimmy here. How you doing?
Good, man. Season 2.
Season 2. It's going well. We got some coffee. Actually, you know what? I forgot to grab the bag of coffee to tell you what we're drinking. So,
right.
Can you actually have a sip while I'm grabbing it really quick?
You gonna start over?
We ain't starting over, bro. It's all about how we go. So we're drinking a whole bean intelligentsia El Gallo breakfast blend. A blend of coffee from Colombia. Let me ask you this. Can you taste the citrus, stone fruit, and caramel in it?
Let me check. Citrus, yes. Stone fruit, don't really know what that is. And what was the last one?
Caramel.
Yeah, there's a little hint, a tone of caramel.
I'm actually a fan of this coffee. I've been drinking it lately for while I work, and it's great.
How many cups do you have?
I just have 1 cup a day. Do you drink coffee? I only have 1 cup a day. I get it ready in the morning while I get ready for some breakfast and then start work.
So that you do just 1 in the morning and that's enough for the whole day.
Yeah, because I don't really drink coffee to keep me up. I drink coffee because I enjoy it. Do you drink coffee to keep you up?
No, I do 1 in the morning with breakfast, and then usually about 2, 3 o'clock, I'll have a second cup.
So is this your third?
No, this is my second one.
Okay, this is my second one too.
Because I knew I was coming, so I was waiting out for this.
Jimmy Clemens, right? Lee.
It's actually not Clemens.
What is it?
It took me about 35 years to figure out that I thought my middle name was Clemens. And then my wife and I, Megan, we were filling out some forms to apply for her visa to come across to America. And I had to get my birth certificate. And so I asked my mom to send me a birth certificate. And then after 35 years of thinking that my middle name was Clemens with the S at the end of it, I actually found out it's actually Clement with the
Clement. T. Wow. That makes more sense, though.
My earth was shattered.
Because Clemens does not really sound like a name.
Hey, well, that's just what I thought it was.
Clement. And they never... What... Do you have another name? Like an Asian name?
Like a Chinese name.
Chinese name? Yeah.
I do.
Can you say it? Or do you want to say it?
I can say it.
Yeah, go ahead.
My grandma gave it to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's sacred.
Yeah.
So the way that my Chinese name is given is the surname, my last name first, which is Lee. Everybody knows that. And then there's 2 characters. So it's Lee and then Chong, which is great. It's like the Great Wall of China great. And then Fu, which is prosperous. So when you break it down into the characters, it's my last name, Lee, and then great, and then prosperous. And that was given to me by my grandma.
So Jimmy Clement.
Doesn't have any translation to Jimmy
or
Clement.
But like Lee. So Jimmy,
that's it.
Clement, prosperous.
Great and prosperous.
Great and prosperous. That's fire.
That's it.
How do you say it, though?
Lee Chang Fu.
Lee Chang Fu?
That's it.
That's fire, bro. That's so cool. I met you in Sydney, Australia. We didn't really actually meet. We just knew of each other, and we did not like each other.
I don't know who didn't like each other first.
Bro, we both didn't like each other at the same time. I feel like.
I just thought that.
You usually look closer to the mic. The mic to you.
I'll probably never hang out with that guy.
Yeah.
And good thing he's in the city, because I'll probably never be friends with him anyways.
So just some context. We went to Hillsong Bible College in Australia. There's 2 campuses, Hills and City. And Jimmy went to Hills, where all of the, homeschool, preppy people went. And I went to the city, where it was just all the, cool people that love to have fun. And just,
well, look, in my defense, and what I've always said is that when you lived in Chicago and New York and wanted to move to Sydney, you're not moving to Sydney for the city. And so if I wanted a great city, I would have stayed in New York or Chicago. But I went there for for Bible college.
I love that.
Anyways,
That's a good one. But you know what? Why not kill two birds with one stone and go there for the Bible college, but also go there for the beaches?
I was focused. I had
beaches.
one intention, one intention only.
What was that?
Just to seek Jesus.
I love that. So we did Bible college together. We kind of met, I guess, in classes. I was the one that was just probably causing a ruckus at times, annoying a lot of people. Do you remember that?
Somewhat. A few classes.
Yeah. And yeah, so let's just get to know Jimmy, I guess, a bit. Where were you born?
In Chicago.
In Chicago. And how long were you there for?
I lived in Chicago till I was 18. And then, I was born in Chicago, and then I lived in Skokie, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago till I was 9, and then we moved to the city. So my dad worked for the city, and then lived in Chicago till I was 18, and then went to college.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Wisconsin, Madison.
Was that fire?
It was awesome. It was good.
And what did you study?
I studied psychology.
Really?
Majored in psychology.
I had no idea.
Which don't really use too much.
Yeah.
But,
I feel like you use it now, I guess, being more involved in church a lot. You'd use that a lot more. Just, of course, not saying that you're a psychologist or anything, but being able to, like, talk to people better. I feel like that's, and be able to read people. I feel like that's a good thing to have in life. Yeah. I had no idea that you did that.
At the time, it was just, I had to declare a major, so I just, let's just go with psychology since I had, most of my credits there.
And then
4 years, and then moved back to Chicago, and then lived there till I was 30. So another 8 years, and then decided to pack up and move to New York.
New York City.
New York City.
The Brooklyn. Big Apple. The city that never sleeps. The concrete jungle. Everything.
Everything.
How was that? Because I feel like I've never been to New York before in my entire life. So
never. To even visit.
Not even visit. The closest I've ever been was Washington, D.C., but I've never been to New York. How was living there?
I always say that if you ever have a chance to live in New York City, to take it.
Yeah.
Take that opportunity, take that chance. It's unlike any other city. It really is. You can't compare it to any other city.
I was about to say, can you compare it to SF? Like, I guess contrast instead of compare.
It's just so unique. There's no other place in the world like it. And it's amazing. I remember living there. So I lived there for 3 years, and my first year, looking back on it, was probably the year that I hated. But it's funny because you kind of earn some stripes, and you're able to identify with other people that have lived in New York because of their first year. Because there's a lot of similarities that happen to them, and it's the adjustment. It's the getting used to living in everything miniature. Your apartment is like 300 square feet, and so your fridges are smaller, your stove, your kitchen overall, and your bathroom is everything is miniature. And then you're waiting for the subway, and it's like 110 degrees down below, and you just wait for a train to pass by just so you can catch that breeze to come by. These are just things that, after living in New York for a year, all the things that you hate in like the crowds in the trains, it's like you hate those things your first year, but then afterwards there's something that happens where you're like, I don't know, it's kind of nostalgic in a way where you're like, man, it's like, I hated being jammed in a subway with so many people, but then you also meet the most amazing people, in the world that cross your paths, that come from all over the world, from different countries, and you end up meeting people that you never thought you would ever meet because of New York. So in that case, it was amazing.
Yeah, wow. I kind of feel that same way with here in SF, I guess, because coming over here is very different for me as well, because I've never really lived in a big city in the United States. I'm from a small town, Plainview, and then I moved to Australia, Sydney, which is a city. I never lived in a city before.
Is Sydney bigger than San Francisco as a city?
In regards to people or side? Like
both?
It's bigger for sure in regards to, I don't even know. That's a good question to find out. Wow. I don't know, but it's bigger than Plainview, Texas. I know that for sure. Mm-hmm. We have 24,000 people in my town. And so I guess coming over here was very different for me because I had to learn to live in a small area. I mean, you know my whole time here. When I first moved here, Jimmy was like the only friend that I had here, and we weren't even friends yet. And so we definitely became really good friends during that time. And yeah, New York though, man, I really do want to go at least visit at some point. I heard it's really hot over there too during the summer, right?
It's hot during the summer, humid.
Cold. Ooh.
Humid during the summers.
And cold during the winters, like very cold.
It's cold, but it's not like Chicago cold. Like Chicago gets like brick.
I guess
cold,
the odd question we're wanting to know is, or the answer we're wanting to know is, the better pizza. Because I know Chicago's known for their pizza, but so is New York. So I guess we got to know the best pizza.
Man, that's a good question.
I know.
That's a good question.
And I'm a connoisseur.
I've learned that if you're not from Chicago, most people that aren't from Chicago just hate deep dish pizza altogether. Because it's an acquired thing, I feel like. But being born and raised on it, I loved it.
Yeah.
And so coming from having that first and then venturing out, I do like New York pizza. But you can find New York pizza in a lot of places other than just New York. And so, when you talk about like thin kind of style.
That's New York pizza, right? Thin, kind of like a little bit floppy.
Yeah.
But you got to bend it to eat it, and it's just really cheesy.
But there is something kind of special about the dollar slices that's like the size of your head.
Yeah.
And if you need a cheap meal in New York and you're in a rush, you could just pop in, get a dollar slice and you're good for, I don't know, 2 hours.
Yeah, maybe. For me, it'd probably be like 30 minutes. I always think about, I don't know if it's like this or not. You remember the old movie Ninja Turtles? Mm-hmm. Was that based in New York where they eat the pizza?
I think so.
Because when I see it, I'm like, man, that pizza looks amazing. I really want to eat it. But deep dish, I actually enjoy deep dish pizza. I like it a lot. That's like it has the cheese underneath, right? And the sauce is on top. Is that kind of like what deep dish is? Or
I mean, it depends on, so there's Giordano's, there's Lou Malnati's, there is Eduardo's, there's Connie's, there's a whole bunch of them that are, claim Chicago deep dish.
Right.
And a lot of it is like in the crust. And it's a thicker crust, and there's a lot of cheese, and then there's sauces on top.
Let me ask you this:
like a pie.
Have you had anything kind of close to that here? Any kind of deep dish pizza close to that here in the Bay Area?
There's a place called Zachary's.
Okay, yeah, I've had Zachary's before.
It's pretty similar, and I would say, yeah. I mean, if you wanted deep dish.
The only issue I have with deep dish is that they have really big tomatoes in the sauce, and I don't like that.
Yeah, it's saucy, it's cheesy, and
I don't mind the sauce, but if the tomatoes are like, squished, I don't know. Like, how would you say that? Yeah, squished. Yeah. Like tomato sauce, not tomatoes in it.
Yeah, it's like real tomatoes.
Yeah, I don't like that. That's a no-go for me. Okay, so New York, and then you were there for how long?
3 years.
3 years, and that's where you kind of turned around quite a bit, right? In regards to like your whole relationship and with God, and
that is where,
right?
Yeah, that is kind of a big turning point in my life.
You want to chat about that for a little bit?
Yeah, sure. What do you want to know?
How was that journey, or how did you first get? I mean, were you always introduced to God, or did you first like get introduced there, or did you kind of like, what's the background for that, and how did you get into this, and then how has that journey been going from there to Australia?
Yeah. So where do I start? So I think I always knew of God, or at least my idea, and I think most people have some idea
of a bigger being, or a higher being,
and maybe their own definition and of thoughts of who God is or what God is. And I always kind of thought God as like an austere kind of floating around, ready to just, smite somebody. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was in New York, out of all places, that a friend of mine invited me to come to church. Yeah, right. And I'll never forget. So we went to a concert the night before. We went to an OAR concert, which I don't know if you've ever heard of OAR. It's probably a band that before your time.
What kind of music is it?
Anyways, it's like reggae rock.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But they were born out of Ohio State
Okay.
University as like a kind of like
College.
a basement college band, and then they started touring with like Dave Matthews.
Oh wow. Okay.
They ended up signing. Anyways, so we went to a concert on Saturday night out in New York, and so at the end of the night he was like, "Hey, why don't you come to church?" And I said, "Yeah, cool. I'll come meet you at church." And we ended up meeting at probably one of the most infamous nightclubs right in downtown Union Square in New York. And I was looking for, the altar, the steeple.
Yeah, where the
church.
people.
Yeah. the traditional church.
Yeah.
And I just remember walking in, and I was a few minutes late because, that's just what you do in New York. You just kind of show up a few minutes late, but the music was already rocking, and it was loud, and I just walked in, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I just remember looking across the room, and there was, what you would expect of New York. It's like being on a subway train, right? Where you have a business person, you have the teenager, you have the single mom, and then you have, a homeless person, all in the same row.
Wow.
And I just, really kind of found myself, captivated being in this environment that I just didn't think of. I always thought church was perfect people, I guess. Yeah. Or at least people that you would think have it all together.
For sure.
On the outside. And so that's what got me, and the music and the people. And then all of a sudden a guy comes up on the stage, and he starts preaching. And this is really kind of the clincher for me, was that I actually started understanding. I understood what he was talking about. Yeah. Where I feel like 9 out of 10 times, as far as I remember going to church with my parents when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, you never understood.
I mean, I was half asleep, and I was ready to go home, and I was already thinking about what I was going to do for the rest of the day. Yeah. But I just remember the messages were just so like the person was just reading my mail, and knew exactly what was going on in my life in New York. And so things kind of took off from there. So that's how it all started.
Cool. And then so you're there at that church, you get connected, started going to a connect group. No?
I hated connect groups.
Really? Okay.
Because Sunday was enough.
Yeah,
I remember telling my friend, this is cool. I'll come check it out once in a while when I want like a rock and roll church.
Yeah.
And I remember telling him that. And so I would come maybe once a month.
Okay.
And then it became once every couple weeks or so. But I remember in general, it was about the whole first year. I really wasn't very committed and wasn't very consistent. I was still kind of living my life in New York, doing what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And I pop in once in a while for church. But then when somebody asked me, well, hey, do you want to go to a connect group? I was like, no, because that was like Sunday's enough. Like, what do you mean you go to church during the week as well? And so I hated connect groups, and it wasn't really my thing. And
just to say, connect groups are a weekly or bi-weekly gathering of a few people, and just kind of have a Bible study, eat some food usually, and then just kind of create some friends and family.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was when things got real. Yeah, right. Because you can get by going on a Sunday. Yeah. And meet a few people, right? And you can just come and go. But Tuesdays, when you kind of sit around the table and you're having real conversation, you got to talk about your faith. And I'm like, man, I just know it's Jesus, and that's it. Like at this time, I never opened up a Bible. Actually, I never opened up a Bible until I actually went to Australia. That's a different story, though.
Really quick though, I want to ask, your life before all this. How did that look to you? Like, were you happy? Were you enjoying life? Were you committing sins, stuff like that, quotations? Like, how did that look, for you in that life before you actually kind of like started going to church more, and then, eventually maybe getting more involved? How did that look? Because the reason why I asked that is because people could probably be listening right now who don't care about church or whatever, or don't even care about who God is.
Right.
But you know, life sometimes can be okay for a moment, but then you're never really satisfied until you have that one thing you're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, you know, how did that look for you?
Yeah, I think for every person, it's
Different, right?
yeah, I guess somewhat different. But I just remember, in general, you know, my first 30 years of my life, call it. I always remember thinking I was doing the best that I can.
Right.
And as long as everybody else was doing it, that was my benchmark.
Okay. Yep.
And it was a lot of just, you know, not going with the crowd, but I thought to myself, like, you know, the American dream, you know,
Right.
it was like, you know, making a lot of money and getting a lot of things and
Having a lot of sex.
having a lot of sex,
Yeah.
right? And it was, well, can it really, is it really a bad thing if everybody else is doing
Right,
it,
right.
you know? And it wasn't like, oh, well, he's going to jump off the bridge, you jump off the bridge as well. But no, it's like, I was living my life that I thought was the way you should be living it.
Right.
You know, according to, I guess, if you ever stop to think, according to whose standard, right? You would think, well, it's just to the world standard, right? It's like, well, all my friends are going out to the bars, and not that anything's wrong with going to the bars,
Right.
you know, but that was a thing that you just did because everybody was doing it,
Right.
you know, as an example. Everybody was sleeping around, everybody was doing this, or everybody was, and that was, you know, you were trying to fit in, I guess, and that was kind of maybe part of the core motivation was I was trying to find who I was and trying to fit in. And so I did what I thought was the best.
You crying? You okay?
It's a little,
No.
little bit of throat.
You got some water right there. For you.
So yeah, I mean, in that regard, I thought I was successful.
Yeah, right.
I was working for myself in Chicago. I was making a ton of money. I, you know, was able to buy, you know, my first place in Chicago. And, you know, I remember there was a point when I was 26 where I thought, man, I'm living the life.
Right.
Because I was making more money than I ever had before. I was dating a girl that I was in love with at the time. I had just bought my first place. I had a car. I had a successful business. And I thought that was awesome, you know, but there is, you know, like the moment that you said where I think you're honest with yourself, you ask yourself, man, there has to be something more to life than this. And, you know, for me, it was, I guess there was a turning point where it was like slowly those things that I that brought me my happiness became, you know, started kind of slipping away from out underneath, you know, and you break up with the girl and the business starts kind of turning upside down. And then, you know, the outlook just doesn't look as great. And then you start kind of, you know, grasping for the things that, you know, you're doing every single week that, you know, that you kind of felt like was sustaining you. And you realize that it's not really sustainable.
Yeah. Man, that's so real. I kind of feel that same way. You know, I bought this computer a while back or a few months ago, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to have this computer. Like, it's going to be great. The moment I received it in the mail and I hadn't opened it, I was like, man, okay, cool, I have this, but what else is there now? Like, what else can I get? And I kind of feel that same way sometimes towards life. Is like, man, there's so many things that we look forward to and that we want so badly, and then once we get it, we're like, this isn't what I actually really wanted or needed, something more, you know. And I guess in regards to like even our lives, that something was God, you know. So anyways, that was your life. You got, fast forward, you started coming more to church, then got into Connect Group. How'd you get into Connect Group? Just started like, oh, I need this, or I want this.
I eventually gave in, and I ended up going because of some girl that invited me.
Yeah, fair. I've done that a few times as well.
And I remember it was a kind of a popular Connect group in the city, and it was in the fashion district, and I checked it out, but I ended up not staying at that Connect group because I was living in Brooklyn. Okay. And a good buddy of mine today, who I'm still great friends with, invited me to his Connect group, which was down the street from where I lived in Brooklyn. Perfect. And I'm glad that he did, because we hung out a few times, but he invited me in and to his house, and I went to his connect group a few times, but from there, just, a real friendship and a real relationship came out of that. And for that, I'm so grateful. Somebody that I've known, for, almost 10 years now.
Yeah. Right.
Which is amazing, because if it wasn't for people like Jason, my connect group leader, other people that I was serving with, I don't think I'd be here today.
Yeah, right.
Or I'd still be, in the faith or part of the church.
Right. Yep. So basically you went through that, went to college in Australia, Bible college, came out here to help out with church, now doing a lot for church as well. Pretty much you can say that you're one of like the main kind of like, I guess, pastors here too as well, from what you've done and what you're doing and how involved you are. It's just pretty cool to see your journey and how you've gone from that to this. But one thing I want to talk about too is not even about that, but a lot of this podcast, we talk about dating and all that, and I want to talk to you because you got married at what age?
I got married in 2017, so I was 37.
37 years old, and us as like, I guess we were millennials or whatever, we're in that part of life where the generation before us got married really early and had a lot of kids. The generation after us are waiting a longer time to get married. So we're like in that area where like, what do we do? Do we wait and all that? I just wanted to talk to you about that because, you got married at 37. So, you probably met her at 35, 34. 30.
I met Megan right at 34 when I first got to Australia.
How did you manage in your mind or like your thoughts of like, because even for me at age 30, I'm like, man, will I ever get married? You know what I mean? I'm sure that thought came to your mind a few times, quite a few times.
Totally.
How did you manage that? What did you do? Give us some advice of what we can do. You know what I mean? For that part.
I don't know about.
Wait, really quick. I just realized my light's not on for my camera.
Oh yeah, that's true.
1 second.
We got to redo this whole thing.
Nah.
Oh, is that better?
Oh yeah.
There was a point in time in New York where I thought to myself, I don't need to be married. And there wasn't a good example set before me of marriage. There wasn't like a page out of anybody's book, out of my book, that I could follow and say, well, that's what I want in my life. Up until that point, I was thinking, well, why would I want to get married? It's like I can date around, New York City.
True.
It's like being single. You can be 40 and still be thriving as a single person and never even consider the thought of, the value of why I would want to get married. So I've said to myself and convinced myself at 32, 33 years old, saying, I might not ever get married and I'll be okay with that. And I think it's almost like a defense mechanism. You end up just being okay with that, and you settle in some ways of saying, well, I don't need to get married and I don't need to have, children, or I don't need a wife. Why would I want that? You find all the reasons why.
But there's a good thought process in that as well, right? Because you can also say, I'm happy with where I'm at, and that's a good way to start going towards a dating scene as well, right? Kind of like, I'm okay with not dating anybody, and I feel like that's a good starting point to be able to be ready to be dating as well, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a certain, I guess, level of in your mind where, yeah, you are whole, right, and you don't need anybody else, and there's a healthy, I guess, sense of that of being. But then I've also realized that as the older you get, you also get more set in your ways.
Right.
And you become very self-sufficient. You become very independent. You become very set in your ways.
Yeah.
And
that's me right now, bro. Come on, man.
And so then it's like, how do I make space for somebody to enter into my life? And so I don't know if this is answering your question. I feel like we're kind of going down a tangent away from it though. But all that to be said, there was a point in my life where I thought I wasn't going to get married.
Right.
And it's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of people that are, in their early 30s, and they've started getting that same thought, and they've almost convinced themselves in thinking that way. My brother, being one of them, said, "Well, I don't need to, I'll be perfectly happy."
Right.
But I think that in his heart, deep down, his desire is truly still to be married.
Right.
And today he is. He's married, and
so there's a chance for me, right?
Always, man.
I love
Always.
it. Shout out.
And I think that if there's that desire, so I think a big turning point for me was I started surrounding myself with people that have healthy
marriages.
Okay,
wow.
That were truly happy.
Yeah.
Not perfect marriages, but people that, loved their wives. And it wasn't the whole ball and chain kind of picture wasn't in their life, but like they really enjoyed their wife, their family, their children, and they brought them along wherever they were, in church and outside of church, and it was awesome. And I remember saying, like, that's what I want in my life.
Right.
And I thought to myself, like, even though I would say, oh, I'll be okay if I'm not married, in
Deep
my
down
own heart,
inside.
in my heart, I was like, man, I want that in my life. I want to be with somebody and be able to create a family and have a family one day.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting, man, because that whole mindset, especially like, even like part of your generation, it's like far out. We should have been married 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
You and I.
Yeah. I mean, you're still a bit older than me. How old are you right now?
I just turned 40.
Wow.
Well, a couple months ago.
Yeah. So
but
we're 10 years
COVID
apart.
though. So when you
so it doesn't count.
it
Yeah.
doesn't count
So
this year.
next year I turn 30. Next year you turn 40. Perfect. I love that. I'm still 29. Yeah, man. I feel like that's such a hard thing, but I think we're starting to, like, our generation are starting to see, like, hey, it's okay to get married later. It's okay to have kids later, because you can still enjoy your life. You can still, have your career and go travel if you want to. Not saying you can't travel with it when you're married or with a kid, but I'm saying it's easier to do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think we're starting to move that way, and I'm actually happy with that, because I guess it's taking a relief off of your shoulders. Like, okay, cool, I got time. There's no need to worry. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep, thriving in our jobs. But let's not say that we're okay with not getting married, but let's say I want to get married, but not yet, right? I feel like that's a lot better than saying I don't want to get married, even though deep down you really do, right?
Yeah, but I guess when you put it that way, it's like, why not yet?
Are you asking me that? Why not yet for myself? Dang.
But why say, I want to be married, but not yet? Like, what's?
I guess for me, and of course I know you're gonna have something to come back for this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. My finances, and also, like, it's pretty much it. It's just my finances for me.
I can only speak for myself,
right?
But if I was to guess, for the majority of men that I've spoken to about the not yet and why they're not ready to get married, or they're dating for years, or they haven't found the right one yet. If it's not that they haven't found the right one yet, but what they have found the one that they want to be with, usually finances is what people would say.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have enough money yet. And can I say this?
Say it, bro.
When Megan and I got engaged, I went from having more money than I ever did before my 20s, and then moved to New York and moved to Australia, where I had a part-time job working at Apple, and I probably had about $3,000 only in my savings account, and got engaged. And if you're waiting to have enough money, the job is never guaranteed,
right?
And it's like, you could have your savings at a job lined up, but then it's like, let's say something happens with your job. Well, what are you going to do then? Right. You're just going to not be married anymore? You're just going to not be engaged anymore? And so with finances, it's more about, I think, having a plan and having a strategy, and knowing that you're that what am I going to do,
Right.
for a source of income? And that is never going to, it's never going to leave. It's, it's even today, it's like if I lost my job,
Right.
if I didn't have any money coming in, doesn't mean I'm no longer married,
True. That's true.
But yeah, I mean, you can't let that be a reason
That's good.
keeping you.
I guess talking about finances, how have you managed that? Because, man, you're making a lot of money. Then you go.
Am I?
No, I said you were in Chicago.
Right.
Then you go to Australia and do customer service, part-time job. That's very different. Of course, we did get paid good money in Australia. They have really good system there. But then, going from there back to over here to SF, still working at Apple for, I guess, a few months, and then changing that whole thing and getting a better job. How have you managed that, man? Because that's huge, especially knowing you're going to get married, and all that. What have you done? What's some advice you can give us right now in our 30s and our 20s as well?
Yeah, that's so good, man. I think about the verse in the Bible where it is the talents that the parable of the talents.
Can you explain it? Because people might not know it.
Yeah, so it's where God gives one person 1 talent, and then another person 5 talents, another person 10, and then it's what you do with it. And so in the parable, he gives these talents, and then he leaves, and he comes back, and then the person with the 10 said, "Oh, hey, I did this with it. I invested it, or I multiplied it, and I brought back to you,
double or whatever,
triple." And then same thing for the 5. And then the person with just 1 buried it and didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And, I think about that, and it doesn't matter how much or how little you make. It's what you do with what you have. And I never worried about it, because I guess when you've had a lot, and then the part I didn't tell you about in the story is that I've actually came to the brink of bankruptcy.
Wow.
Right before I turned 30, and I was about $80K in debt.
Wow.
And from the business that I had run, and I just ran it to the ground, and got to a point where it was unhealthy, and I was reaching into my own pocket to help fund to keep the business afloat. And at the end of the day, I shut it down, but I ended up walking away with about $80K in the red. And, by the grace of God and through, working it out and saving, I ended up clearing that debt in the short time of just less than 3 years.
Wow.
And the job that I was working at in New York, I was working on a deal. I was in sales, and one of the commission checks that I had towards the end of the time I was in New York was enough to pay for the first 2 years of being in Australia.
Wow.
And so not only did God wipe away that $80K of debt, but also gave me this huge lump sum. And that's when I decided, I'm going to, God took me from there to here, and I'm going to take this and invest it into, finding more about my faith and knowing, not just believing in something, but actually making it real. And so that's how I ended up, making that decision to go to Australia. But then when you have a lot and then you end up having nothing and you're in the negative, I got to a point where it's like, I know what it's like to have a lot of money. I also know what it's like to not have.
Like Paul. Yeah.
And so when I was working at Apple in Australia, I was making $15, $16 an hour.
Yeah.
But I knew that God was going to provide. He was providing for that season that I was in, and is what I did with it, And
so good, man.
So then when I came back to San Francisco, I got transferred to Apple here in Union Square, and I was.
We worked together too for a little bit. Remember that?
We did work together.
And I got fired. That's another.
I got you the job at Apple.
You did, yeah.
But it was enough in that season, of what I was making, and I just remember like living in the Bay Area, like working at Apple and about to get married. It just wasn't going to be enough to just keep on working at Apple.
Yeah.
But at that time, I hung it up. And I said, I'm not going to go back into corporate America.
Yeah.
And I was just going to work whatever I had to do and build church.
Yeah.
And I remember Rich Langton came over from Australia. And
Spoke at Broadway Studios, right?
Yep. And he's somebody that is amazing man. And he talked about how his dream was always to work for church as well. But Cass, his wife, got hired onto church meanwhile he was doing all these other things.
Right. And
I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, I thought I was going to be working at church.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm not.
Yeah.
And so I started doing all these other things, and maybe was working at Apple. But then I ended up going back into corporate America, and I remember God got me into this opportunity.
Yep.
And I interviewed, and I ended up getting this job, and he doubled what I was making in New York.
Wow.
And I left for 3 years, and I just thought to myself, man, how is that possible where I can leave corporate America, have this gap in my resume, and get hired on? I was making double what I was making in New York. And then fast forward, I worked a year, and I just didn't like being in sales anymore.
You weren't happy?
I just wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving, and on my own, decision.
He didn't get fired. He left.
And I took 4 months off, and God did it again.
Yeah.
And he put me in a job that I'm in right now, that I've been in this last year, in a completely different industry, in biotech, working with diagnostic tests. And again, God has doubled my income from what he was doing, what I was getting at that previous employer. And so over the course of the last 3 years of being since Australia, God has doubled twice.
That's crazy.
My income. And it's in a completely, different field that I never thought I'd be in. So,
all because you were faithful in what you had in your hands.
Absolutely.
And you're coming out with the COVID.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, the company that I'm working for, I mean, not that COVID is super cool, but it is.
It's definitely cool.
It's, in high school, I hated biology. It was not something that I would, couldn't wait to go to class for.
Right.
But yeah, it's a company that basically detects DNA of a virus.
Right.
And, the presence of it, or a pathogen is the technical term of it. But it's I'm working with people that are far above my pay grade, and they're they all have their PhDs, and they're scientists. They're so yeah, it's amazing to be part of that group and to be working on these type of projects that's really helped fighting this I guess battle against COVID.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Seeing you now, you would never expect that. You never see like $80,000 in debt. That's like I couldn't even imagine being in that much debt. But then going from there to working a part-time job, and then coming over here and still doing the same thing in San Francisco, the most expensive city in the United States.
Yeah.
About to get married, and then, man, that's crazy, and that's just so awesome. And you say, that God did this, and a lot of times Christians say that a lot. God did this, and basically when we say that, we believe that God provided the job for us, but it's not just like a magical thing that happens. There's a lot of work in the background that people don't see.
My buddy who invited me to church in New York, I went to college with, and he was a year older than me, or he is a year older than me, and but he was always looking out for me all throughout college, and even after we graduated, when I was working in Chicago, he would always, and he's ultra successful, and he would always come visit through in Chicago if he was like flying somewhere for business, and he had a layover. And I remember we had lunch one time, and this is when I had no interest in God at all, and I was probably the furthest away. And I would always ask him, like, why are you so successful? And he'd always, and it was so annoying, because he'd always say, it's all God. It's all God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he would always point and be like, oh, it's all God. And I know what you're saying. It's like, that's so annoying. What do you mean God's doing this all?
Yeah.
And it is, there's nothing more freeing and liberating when your worries of you trying to do it yourself. And I think I finally started to understand what he meant by all God, is because it was no longer him working and doing this all on his own effort, but it was surrendering it to God and saying, God, you do this. And it's not that God comes in and does the work for you.
I always give the example about that. a really quick example that helped me to kind of even understand what I've been saying was in Australia, I needed a job, right? But no one was hiring me. The only thing I had ever done was be a mailman before that. And so, people say, man, just pray for God to provide you a job. I'm like, what the heck? Okay, cool, I'll pray. But faith, we go by the Bible, and the Bible says faith without works is dead. And so I had faith that God's going to provide me a job, but I'm still making my resume. I'm still going to all these different businesses, store by store, saying, hey, are y'all hiring and all that. I'm still going online to find all this. And at the end of it all, once I do get a job, I'm like, God did provide it for me. Yeah. But without my works, it goes hand in hand. Faith and works goes hand in hand. And I think that's kind of like the way I always see faith in my life is like, I have faith that God can provide. And so all of the pressure that's on me is taken off because I'm like, he won't ever fail me.
Yeah.
But I still got to do some work in there. You know what I mean?
It's like you do it all, like it's all on you.
Yeah.
But then it's like you trust and you have faith, like it's all on God.
Yeah.
And man, I think you're spot on. Man.
It's comforting, bro, because you're no longer worried, because I could have been super worried. And I was at times, but then I'm like, okay, wait, I got to remember. He's going to provide. He's going to take care of me. And he did. And he provided a great job. I had enough money to pay for college.
Here's the thing, though, too, is that he does it, but it's never the way you expected it.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, what holds people back is because they want God to do it the way that they want it to be done. And the way that God has worked in my life, all throughout Australia and even before that, and when I think back about from Chicago to New York to Australia and then now and then being married and then, having Lennox, it's like I could not, and this was my testimony, is that I could not have planned this better myself.
Right.
There's no way, and what God has done, in our finances and in, our friendships, our relationships, all of these things, it's like this tapestry of his grace.
You know what's amazing? The verse where it says that he'll give desires of your heart. And it's so crazy because I've thought about that before. Do you know where that's found, the Bible verse?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's in Proverbs.
Anyways, basically it says that that God will give you the desires of your heart.
As you delight in him.
As you delight in him. But the thing about it is, even sometimes I don't even know my own desires in my heart, but he does.
Yeah.
And so for you, he knew your desires further in your deepest of your mind, deepest of your heart, what you wanted, and orchestrated it so beautifully now that you see, you have Lennox, you have Megan, and you have a great friendships with people here, and you're just doing things that you want to do for church, but also have a very, great job. Very great job. Doesn't make sense. You have a great job, and it's just things are going well. Doesn't mean things are perfect because, things still, you have tough times, but to see where you've gone, what you've gone through, and how the whole journey of that is so beautiful. And like desires of your heart, you didn't even know this was your desire, but it's like it's there, and like, wow, how beautiful that is, right?
Yeah, yep, totally. Man.
That's cool, man.
And it's like when you try to do it on your own, and you try to strategize, and not that there isn't a plan, but it's like, man, it's just the crazy thing is that I don't even know what's going to happen next year. Yeah. But it's like the surrendering and letting God just do it,
It's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. We talked a lot about your journey in life and your whole journey with God. And I hope this does help people. Like some people listen to this, might not be Christian, some might be. But I hope you understand that this decision that we've made to like trust in God and love God and be part of this is something that we've chosen because there's no other way to live. I feel like for me, if I did not have Christ in my life for some of the things I've gone through in these past 3 years here in San Francisco, I don't know if I'll even still be alive. You know what I mean? Because it's just been some tough times, and knowing that, so many times in the Christian world, it's like, if you don't give your life to God, you're going to hell. But if you give it out to God, you're going to heaven. But I believe it's something totally even greater than that. And it's, you give your life to God today, you have someone there for you the rest of your life. You have your best friend. You have the creator of heaven and earth that's going to actually walk with this journey with you. And you're never going to be alone. And I think that's so much more powerful than like, oh, not going to hell or, oh, just going to heaven.
Totally.
No, you have life here right now and you can thrive and you can be content. You can have joy because he's in your heart and he's in your life.
I think the hardest part for me, when I hear that is, and it is beautiful. But it's, time and time again, God has done better than I expected. He's done better than I planned.
Yeah.
And he's, I thought it was going to go this way. And then he's actually done this. And when I think back, it's always in hindsight, you're like, man, if I had held on to my plan, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I remind myself of always. It's that, I know that people have said this before in the past. It's like, thank God that I'm not where I should be. Right.
Yeah.
And I think when people have said that before, it's like, I used to be, what does that mean? It's like, thank God I'm not where I should be, but, thank God that because of his grace, I am, where I don't deserve to be because of his grace. And, because if it was up to me, man, who knows where I'd be at 40 years old? I'd probably still be in Chicago.
Probably married somebody that you didn't love or that you just wanted to.
There were a couple times where like I wanted to pull the trigger and just get married on a whim. And there was a girl that I dated in Chicago for just about 3 years, and she wanted to get married. And I thought, oh, she would be the one. I was 26 at the time. I thought I could get married. And who knows, but I know that the life that I'm living today is far better and exceeds any of my expectations, before, which is just amazing. It's like when you let go of this blueprint and this plan that you think that you have for your life, and you see, the hard thing is trusting that, like, man, or believing, I guess,
the unknown or something.
Yeah, it's like, that God is you're saying that God is going to give me a life better than I even have planned for myself. Yeah. That's what you're telling me.
Makes no sense.
And it's like, I can't convince you of that, because words aren't going to just convince you of that. If I can talk you into it, I can talk you out of it.
Exactly.
Right. And, I know that, this is what I want to say earlier, and it kind of reminded me of it, is that I think that the reason why God has been, faithful and blessing us, obviously because he's so good, he's good, but also because, even when I was working at Apple and I was making far less than what I was making now, that tithe of honoring him with our finances, it didn't matter if I was making $100 that week or if I was making $1,000 that week or $5,000 that week. I know that if I couldn't tithe on a $100 check, which was, $10, there's no way that I'll be able to tithe on a $5,000 check.
Right.
And so if I was faithful in that, and I think that God opens up doors
100%.
And bigger doors. There's a verse in the Bible that says the world of the generous gets bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And the stingy gets smaller and smaller. And I think that God knew, or God's always known, right? But that if I was faithful, even when I was making, minimum wage or, part-time salary, he knew that that I was stewarding it well, that he could trust me with more, right? That if he gave me more, I would still bless you. He was still, I would still honor him with it. And, and we're coming up on an incredible season in church with Heart for the House. Yeah. And my wife and I have had some awesome conversations around it. And it's been a crazy season where we haven't been in a physical building. We haven't gathered as a church in 6 months. Yeah. And I said, there was a time where I thought, well, it doesn't feel like church. Should we still be, giving what we originally committed?
Right.
And it was a really quick conversation. I was like, if anything, this should be the time where we, continue to be even more generous. Yeah. This is when the church needs us more than any other time.
100%.
And when you would guess that some people are going to be pulling back, this is when we are going to step forward.
Right.
And so our original commitment at the beginning of the year is what we're going to follow through with.
That's great.
Because I know that, our circumstances might change, but our decisions and our convictions of what we decided of that we're going to continue to build God's house.
Yeah.
And that's why we're in the Bay Area. That's why that's our main purpose of why Megan and I got married in the first place, is that we decided that we were going to build a life and a marriage on purpose, which was to build God's kingdom.
It's amazing.
And so, why would we shy away from our commitment just because we're not meeting at church? It's like, because, 10 years down the road, COVID could happen again, or some other, outbreak and pandemic could
COVID-20.
happen. Right. That doesn't mean like I stop hanging out with God or stop talking to God.
Yeah.
But we still continue to, that's crazy. That's like saying, well, if there's something that happens like a pandemic, that means that my relationship with my wife, I just stopped talking to her, or I stopped reading, my Bible altogether, or we just stopped being generous. It's like there are things that just must continue on.
Yeah.
Because God's greater than that. He's bigger than that. So
it's amazing, man. I love that. I love just being faithful in the small so you can be faithful in the big. I love that so much. And I've definitely learned a lot from that as well, just because, like, just working in terrible jobs, getting paid so low, you just still giving your tithe, just trusting that God's going to provide. It's not easy, but...
but the crazy thing is, like, living in America, what you're getting paid is still more than, 90% of this world, is making, so it's what you do with it, right?
What are you looking forward to this next year?
This next year?
Yeah. In life or whatever.
I'm excited about what's ahead for sure. Yeah. And what I mean by that is like the next 10 years of my life. I think for the first time in my life, I'm able to have somewhat of a trajectory of knowing that if I continue on this path that I've found myself on. And I remember, early on as a Christian, and even still today, I would say this, is that it doesn't matter at what age, you find Christ or you find Jesus or you fall in love with Jesus, as long as you are on the right path.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter when you end up on it, but as long as you're on the right path. And I know that God has done more in these last 8-9 years, almost 10 years of my life than he did in my first 30 years of my life.
Wow.
And I know that if I continue on this path, and there's nothing complicated about it, it's so simple. It doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
But it's so simple.
Yeah.
And I guess for the first time in my life at 40, I know that if I continue to sow into his house, I continue to pursue the things of God, I continue to honor and love my wife, I continue to, be the leader of my household and raise my family on these principles, and continue to seek him on a daily basis. Man, if God has produced this much fruit in my life in the last 8 to 9 years, I can only imagine what he's going to do in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we'll have this conversation again when I'm 50. And, one of the goals in my life is to be a millionaire by 50. And it's not, it's not, God knows the desires of my heart, like we talked about, and it's not about selfish ambition. It's like, I want to be a millionaire at 50 so I can live and give generously,
man.
Give in a ridiculous way.
One of my goals in life, because I've understood how it feels to have debt and be in debt. I want to be able to pay somebody's debt off, like to have enough money to be like, oh, you know what? I'm 50 grand in debt. Psh, I got you, bro. Mm-hmm. Like, but let's do this journey together, because, so many times you can pay for someone and then they get back into it.
Right.
But, it's just like, I want to be able to bless people like that and be able to have enough money to do that. And man, that's one of my goals in life for sure.
That's awesome.
Man.
Yeah.
That's really cool, bro.
Yeah. I mean, to be able to just be reckless in your generosity.
Yeah.
I think that's just so countercultural.
Yeah.
And I know that is something that, because of my struggle and wins and losses with finances, I know that that's a gift that God's given me, is to be generous.
For sure.
And so, and if I don't exercise that gift of being generous, it's like,
if you don't exercise it now, then you won't do it later.
Totally. Exactly. And, so, that's what I'm looking forward to, and, I know my wife's on board, and
so is Lennox.
It's cool, because he'll be 10 years old by then, know, and I think the thought of knowing that he starts off on my shoulders is also another cool thing. I didn't,
bro.
I wasn't raised, in a household that, had much faith. They're on the Bible, and I love my mom and dad, and they raised us as best as they could. They immigrated from China and from Burma, and they raised 3 kids. They paid for our college, which is amazing.
That is amazing.
And so I've started a fund for Lennox, when he was 3 months old.
Wow.
And it's that seed, and imagine what it's going to be like when he's 18. And, it's his choice, to go to college, kind of, not really, like make sure that he goes.
Well, look the way life looks now. I don't know. College might not be as important as
That's
it is
true.
right now.
Right.
or
But
before.
in math classes, he's definitely going to get A's, straight A's in math
Sure,
class.
sure.
That's kind of a microaggression.
No, not if you're saying it
That's
yourself
true.
because you're Asian. By the way,
That's
people
true.
that are just listening, he is Asian.
But yeah, one thing that I would say as far as advice, if
Talk
I was
to
in my
us, bro.
20s, I would take $5,000 if I had it, or even $1,000, or even $100, and I would open up a Roth IRA. Is what I would do.
What is that? What is a Roth IRA?
So it is probably one of the best investment tools out there, and it's free to open up.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know of, you can go to Fidelity or any of these sites, and you can open up a Roth IRA. And so Roth basically IRA is basically an acronym for an individual retirement account.
Okay.
And so you can do that at 22 years old. And I wish somebody had told me this, and if I had $1,000 or even $100 that I didn't need today, and I would actually take that and I would plant that seed. And so what happens is, the beauty of it though is that anything that it accumulates, any interest that it accumulates, it's tax free.
Oh wow.
And so all the gains
It's all yours.
you get to keep, right? So imagine if you're 22 years old, and this is, if I could tell myself, if I can go back 20 years, man, I wish I took some of that money that I was making and I just put it away in something that was bearing interest, that I would just be able to keep all the gains for.
Are all Roth IRAs like the same in regards to like the amount of interest that you accumulate, or is that too much to kind of go into?
No, not really. I mean, so Roth basically just means tax-free earnings, tax-free earnings on it. So, but in the vehicle itself, in the IRA, there's a lot, depending on what company you end up opening it up with, there's a lot of different funds you can choose. So some funds have better interest returns, but that's where the risk is involved in it. But that's where you also, you work with somebody to decide what fund you want to put that $100 in. So there's a max. So right now in 2020, it's a $6,000 max that you can put away for it. But think about it. If you're able to put away $6,000, imagine what it's going to be like, 20 years, when you're 40, when you're my age, and you started at 22 years old, that $6,000 is going to look like 20, but, and you've done nothing.
Yep.
You've done nothing, and so it's powerful, and it's this, the consistency and the discipline and knowing that, having that knowledge to be able to do that. So that's the best advice I would give somebody that's 22 years old. If you had $100 or $1,000, and if you could do 6,000, do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I might even do it too. Last thing I wanted to ask you, because we are in a group text with some friends about
we're in so many group texts.
Yeah, we're in a lot of group texts, but one that I really enjoy is the one with some of us are talking about money and finances.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us that have goals to be millionaires, to become, to have enough money, because we do want to be, be blessed to be a blessing. And there's a lot of books that we've put out there. What is one book that you recommend for anybody out there trying to just be better financially stable in life? Just one. So you better think of it, a good one.
Does it have to be finance related?
Yeah, for finances.
See, I think the
Tell me,
key,
what do you think? Yeah, what do you think?
the key to I think successful savings or wealth building is consistency.
Okay.
It's having consistency in what you're doing. And so the book that I would say that really kind of set a lot of the right foundation isn't necessarily just a straight finance book, but it's written by Stephen Covey, and it's called The 7 Principles of Highly Effective People.
Okay. Wow.
And they are 7 principles that are done so they research, hundreds and thousands of the most effective people in life, and why they're successful, why they're effective. And those same principles are, because they're principles, they're applicable to every area of your life.
Yeah.
And so you can find the 7, and you can actually apply these 7 principles of highly effective people. If you can take those same principles and apply it to your finances,
You're killing it.
You're killing it. So,
Thanks, bro. That's great. I think we're good for the day. Like, great chat. Great to hear about your journey. We definitely will get you back on here again. But
hopefully before I'm 50.
Yeah, definitely, man. Because when you're 50, I'll be 40.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. See, it's like I'm almost kind of talking to my younger self.
You're speaking to me. You're 30-year-old me. 30-year-old you.
That's it. That's the crazy thing to think, is that none of this even my life at 30 was completely backwards and worse off than most 30-year-olds that I know today.
You were in 80 grand in debt, right? At 30?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And my head was way up, where, but,
Well, thanks, bro. Thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. Legit.
On that note.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. It's gonna be a great rest of this year. And next year we're gonna kill it, bro.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, bro. That's it.